Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Monday morning, talking 7 games around the association. Before we dig into the slate, your quick reminder, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Also, hit that thumbs up button if you like the content that I'm producing. It goes a long way to helping me produce more videos. If you happen to stumble across this video and you're not already following me on Twitter, my Twitter handle at Brent Hyden1 is in the description down below. While you're hitting that follow button on the Twitter machine, make sure you send me a DM. You can find out how you can get access today for a very special Cyber Monday price that covers you all the way through the playoffs. That gets you access to Discord, daily stat breakdowns, and the projections, again, all the way through the playoffs. Please make sure you share this with your friends if you are someone that is already subscribed. That way we can grow our community. But without further ado, let's take a look at the games. The first game we're going to talk about here, Milwaukee at Charlotte. Milwaukee 4.5-point favorites, 234.5 over under. Very interesting game to target here. Starting with the Milwaukee side of things, obviously we do have to talk about Giannis. Giannis has been insane in this spot. Last time these teams faced off to open the season, Giannis pulled down 18 rebounds and had 25 points. Giannis is coming off another monster game, 34 points, 18 rebounds, 8 assists against the Spurs. He's notched 30 plus real points and 10 plus rebounds in 3 straight games. He's a double-double in 5 straight games. He's eclipsed 50 fantasy points in 7 of the last 10 games. I have a lot of interest in Giannis here. He comes in at 11-6 on DraftKings, 12-7 on FanDuel. Taking a look at the projections, you can see an $1,100 difference. 12-7 is really, really pricey. It's going to determine, I guess, the status of Chris Paul is going to determine how viable Giannis is tonight. The same thing with like Draymond Green. So there's a lot of injuries that are going to determine which of these studs is going to be the best option. In tournaments, as it stands right now, not knowing the status of Chris Paul and Draymond Green, in tournaments, I think Giannis is the play over James Harden and over Kevin Durant. In cash, it will depend again on the status of those other players. But right now, I think Giannis is a great pivot off of James Harden in tournaments. We saw him actually outproduce James Harden last time out, even when Harden didn't have Chris Paul in the lineup. But I do like Giannis pretty much all formats. It is a solid matchup for him. Charlotte's 21st in defensive efficiency to small forwards on the season. I really like Malcolm Brogdon in this spot as a value option. As you can see, projects to be a pretty solid cash game play. He's been really solid of late as well. Charlotte does rank 28th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. They're giving up 24.9 points, 5.9 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 46% field goal shooting, and 35% from 3. Brogdon has 30 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. He's eclipsed 25 fantasy points in 6 of the last 10 games. That makes him a fantastic cash game like option, especially if you're looking, for someone to build in that mid-range in your head-to-head contests and things like that. But given that he's been over 30 fantasy points twice in back-to-back games, that gives him some tournament upside here too. So I like him a significant amount. I do really like Bledsoe in tournaments. Bledsoe's price up to 7,200 and 7,400, as you can see, still projects for a decent value. You can use him in cash. I think there's going to be better places to go, however, but he's fine. And Chris Middleton, I really like Chris Middleton as well. Charlotte does struggle in isolation defense and spot ups. That makes Chris Middleton someone that can actually have some success here, especially in tournaments. He's still fine in cash just because he's going to play a lot of minutes, take a lot of shots, and it's a good matchup. But really solid spot here for Chris Middleton. Brook Lopez, you can roll out in tournaments. Christian Wood is a name to keep an eye on. If Ersan Ilyasova misses this game, Christian Wood could get into the lineup and be someone to consider. He puts up really solid fantasy production in limited minutes. He's just not going to play a ton of minutes unless something were to happen in this game, were to blow out or whatever. But on the flip side, obviously, Kemba Walker in a fantastic spot. Kemba Walker comes in at 9,400 on DraftKings. That's pretty pricey. He's also expensive on FanDuel. There's someone else that I like more in cash that we're going to get to here shortly. But Kemba Walker, really, really good spot here. He's the kind of point guard that, or kind of guard that we like to target against Milwaukee. Guys that shoot a lot of shots in the mid range guys that shoot a lot of 3 pointers. Milwaukee really struggling um, to defend the 3 point line. As far as attempts goes, they're giving up 35.9% or 35.93 point attempts per game. They're doing a good job on defense, though 34.6% 3 point shooting, but they're getting hammered in the mid range. 45.8% shooting in the paint, 44.9% in the mid range. That's something, Kemba Walker, 26% of his shots come in the mid range. So Kemba Walker, fine in tournaments. I think there's going to be better options in cash. Looking at the rest of this team, Batum has not been very good recently, but is priced down to 4,900 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. He's someone that's a little bit appealing here as well, just because we know he has upside. He hasn't really shown it, but he does have upside. He's fine in cash because he's just going to play a lot of minutes in that price tag. It's not hard for him to pay that off. He hasn't done it a whole lot recently, but over 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 has been pretty solid. Was decent in this matchup the first time these teams faced off, so I'm fine with Batum in cash and tournaments. Jeremy Lamb, a name to keep an eye on. His price actually down since yesterday. Still played 30. Still had 30 fantasy points against the Hawks yesterday. If MKG is out once again, we know Lamb gets a boost in minutes and production. I really like Jeremy Lamb in all formats here. Marvin would be someone that you can look at in tournaments. Maybe cash on DraftKings. Again, I was all over him yesterday. I'm not as high on him in this spot. That being said, Milwaukee does allow 42.7% field goal shooting on corner threes. Marvin Williams, a guy, 17% of his shots are corner threes. So Marvin Williams, definitely someone to consider if MKG is out. We saw him actually put up a really solid outing against his team last time out. So Marvin Williams, another name to keep an eye on. He actually projects to be one of the better values on the slate as of right now. Moving on to Minnesota at Cleveland. Minnesota 6-point favorites in this one with a 216.5 over under. The only real injury news is the stuff that we've been dealing with for a while now with Sam Decker, George Hill, and Kevin Love all being out. Looking at the Minnesota side of things first, Karl Anthony Towns put up 35 points, 22 rebounds, 6 assists against the Bulls last time out. Karl Anthony Towns, I absolutely love him in this spot. Cleveland is decent on the boards, but they do struggle in the paint and on defense. Opposing centers are shooting 37% from 3. That's something I highlighted against the Bulls. Karl Anthony Towns taking about 4.5 3-point attempts per game. Only shot 1 of 5 from 3 against the Bulls, but still someone that's shooting a decent amount of 3s. So this is a spot where Karl Anthony Towns is going to be one of my favorite center options on the slate. Great in cash, great in tournaments. Really, really pricey, but given the extra usage and production that he sees whenever Jimmy Butler is not there, that really helps him. In addition to Towns, obviously it is Andrew Wiggins' revenge game. Andrew Wiggins coming off a 0 for 12 outing against the Bulls. That's not good. Cleveland does rank 22nd in defensive efficiency to shooting guards, so that's a pretty big boost to Andrew Wiggins. I like him at his price, 5,800 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Not as appealing there on FanDuel, but in tournaments he's fine. You can even use him in cash on DraftKings, I think, at that price tag. It's a perfectly fine spot for him, and then of course you do have the revenge factor if that's your kind of thing. Same thing goes for Derrick Rose. He continues to play mid to upper 20s in minutes. He's fine in tournaments. Has scored 20 or more points in each of the last 3 games, shooting 26 of 41 from the floor in that span. That's really solid. I like his price, 6,700 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Perfectly fine in tournaments for you there. Cleveland does struggle against spot-up shooters. They're giving up 1.08 points per possession to spot-up shooters. They allow 1.32 points per possession in transition. Covington, 33% of his possessions come in transition, 23.2% of his possessions come as spot ups. He's great in cash and great in tournaments. More of a tournament play on FanDuel at 6,800. More of a cash and tournament play on DraftKings at 59. We know he's just going to play a lot of minutes. He's another guy who really struggled to shoot. We shot 1 of 18 against Chicago. That the 18 field goal attempts is really appealing. The 10 3-point attempts is also really appealing. And then of course we know the defensive stats are going to be there for him. The minutes are going to be there for him. So I really like Robert Covington in this spot. Cleveland giving up 45% shooting on corner 3 attempts. Robert Covington, a guy, I don't have it in my notes because I haven't changed the team name for him, but Robert Covington, a guy that's generally taking a decent amount of corner 3s. Let me pull that up real quick because that's going to bug me. Let's see. 6% of his field goal attempts are corner 3, so pretty, not a ton, but still something of note for Covington. But that pretty much does it for the Minnesota side. I don't have a ton of interest in Dario and Taj and Jeff Teague in this spot. Dario and Taj are pretty much splitting minutes. When Taj is producing, Taj is getting the minutes. When he's not producing, he's not getting all the minutes. Yeah, it's just not a spot where I think we need to go tonight. There's definitely better options. Looking at the Cleveland side of things in this spot, I do have some interest in a few of these guys from Cleveland. Obviously, Colin Sexton has been playing much better recently. He's averaging 21.2 points on 53.7% shooting over his last 5 contests. It is not a very good matchup. Minnesota actually really solid against point guards so far on the season. But Colin Sexton, someone that at 5,800 is somewhat appealing in cash games. I'm not counting on the tournament upside that he's shown the past couple of games to continue. But if you're looking for someone that's going to shoot a lot and play a decent amount of minutes, Colin Sexton, a decent way to get exposure here. Tristan Thompson coming off another monster game, 16 points, 20 rebounds. Third straight double-double for him. He's in a great spot against Karl Anthony Towns. Minnesota ranks 23rd in defensive efficiency to centers on the season. They've allowed them to average 23.3 points and 14.8 rebounds so far this season. Tristan Thompson at 6,100 is still appealing for cash in tournaments. Obviously, we know he has tournament upside. You know, like I said, 3 straight double-doubles. Projects for in the mid or the low 30s in fantasy points. But obviously we know he has upside. I really like him in cash and tournaments in this spot. They're giving up, Minnesota's giving up 15.6 second chance points this season. Thompson averaging just over 4 second chance points per game, but might end up recommending a tournament fade because based on ownership, we'll have to wait and see how ownership shakes out. If he looks like he's going to be lower owned, then he could work in tournaments, but if he's going to be pretty popular, then I would reserve him strictly for cash. Clarkson's fine in tournaments. Still not getting the minutes I would like, but he's still producing in limited minutes. And then Cedi Osman, 20 plus points in 2 of his last 3. Now that he's starting at the 4, assuming that stays, I have a lot of interest in Cedi Osman. Minnesota's allowing power forwards to shoot 44.4% from the floor, 39.6% from 3. Cedi Osman, someone that I think is very, very interesting. 5K on DraftKings, that's really appealing. You're getting probably 3, 4, 5, sometimes, more than that, 3-point attempts from Cedi Osman. Generally getting a lot of minutes. Didn't happen against Houston. Still had an okay game in his limited minutes, shot really poorly, but you're getting some rebounding upside with him playing closer to the basket. You're getting, the 20-point upside from him. I really like Cedi Osman in cash and tournaments in this spot tonight. Someone that I will probably be getting some exposure to. And then Larry Nance is someone to look at in tournaments tonight. Moving on, Houston at Washington. Obviously, this one we need to pay very close attention to because of injuries. Chris Paul is questionable. Dwight Howard is questionable. Um, Gerald Green is questionable. Carmelo, Nene, and are both out, and then John Wall is also questionable for this game. So lots and lots and lots to keep an eye on. Houston favored by 3.5 in this one, 224 over under. Um, Looking at the um, Houston side of this first, I'm going to address this as if CP3 sits. If Chris Paul plays, obviously James Harden takes a hit, Eric Gordon takes a hit, and it would make it harder to get some of these guys because you do have James Harden who comes in at 11-4 and 11-7 on FanDuel. Coming in, obviously had a really solid game, has been pretty solid recently, but that elevated price tag makes it a little less appealing if Chris Paul plays. If Chris Paul sits, obviously James Harden, fantastic option, has a 45.8% usage rate and averages 1.80 fantasy points per minute in 177 minutes without Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony on the floor. Would be great in cash, would be great in tournaments. Again, I still think I would go Giannis over Harden if you're building a bunch of tournament lineups or you're playing in very large field tournaments, because you can get a pretty decent ownership edge. Eric Gordon, perfectly fine in cash and tournaments, smaller field tournaments, I guess. If Chris Paul sits, he does have a 24% usage rate and is averaging 0.74 fantasy points per minute without Paul and Melo on the floor. Would play about 36, 37, 38 minutes, assuming this game stays close. We saw him play almost 39 last game. The 16 field goal attempts, a little extra ball handling duties. 5 of 11 from 3, which is appealing considering Washington is just getting torched on 3-pointers, or opponents are shooting 38.3% from 3 against them. So Eric Gordon's someone to look at again if Chris Paul is out. If Chris Paul plays, he's interesting in tournaments. Washington ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to point guards, 29.6 points, 6.4 rebounds, 9.9 assists, 41.3% from 3. Would be in a great spot for Chris Paul, again, in tournaments. And then, like I said, Harden takes a little bit of a downgrade. Washington is allowing opposing power forwards to shoot 45.9% from 3 and 50.9% from the field. I have a lot of interest in PJ Tucker as a value option here. PJ Tucker comes in at 3,900 over on DraftKings. The 40 plus minutes, I don't expect that to happen every single night, but I do expect high 30s most nights. He does take a decent amount of 3-pointers. He can get you some rebounding upside. PJ Tucker, really, really appealing here. 72% of his shots come from 3. Again, Washington's allowing power forwards to shoot 45.9% from 3. Tucker also plays some small ball 5, and if Dwight Howard is out, you would see, some Tucker at the 5, which would be a rebounding boost. I really like PJ Tucker. Only 3,900 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel. One of my favorite value options on the slate, and I don't think people are really going to look at him, but he actually projects to be a pretty solid value, especially on DraftKings. Looking at the rest, James Ennis is fine on FanDuel as a punt, continues to be, right around that $3,700 mark. I'm fine with it if you want to punt. Use him as a punt option. He does have upside in the spots, especially. He just is a guy that doesn't generally put up really, really big games, but he does have that potential from time to time. Capella averaging 37 minutes per game over his last 5. That's really appealing whenever you consider he's well over a fantasy point per minute. He's averaging 14.4 rebounds and 20.2 points over that span. He's recorded a double-double in each of his last 5 games. Washington giving up 47.5 rebounds, 14.7 second chance points, and 47 points in the paint per game. 21% of his possessions are as the roll man, where Washington is allowing 1.4 points per possession on the season. Clint Capella coming in at 7,900 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. Fantastic cash game and tournament option on both sites. Flipping over to the other side, John Wall regardless of Chris Paul's status, I think John Wall has to be considered in tournaments. He's, again, questionable for this game, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. If Chris Paul sits, I really, really like John Wall. In tournaments would be someone that I would be getting a significant amount of exposure to in a large field GPPs. If Chris Paul plays, I would tone that back a little bit, but I would still have some interest in him, mostly because of the sheer volume of minutes. And 49% of his shots come at the rim. Houston's allowing opponents to shoot 66% at the rim. That's still pretty appealing here. Bradley Beal continues to be way too cheap on DraftKings, continues to be appropriately priced on FanDuel, comes in as a fantastic cash and tournament play in this spot. Would obviously see a boost if John Wall is out, but Houston ranks 17th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. A little less than league average. I still really like him in cash and tournaments. Without Wall on the floor, Beal has a 32.6% usage rate, averages 1.21 fantasy points per minute. Would come into very close to a core option for me if John Wall were to miss this game. Kelly Oubre, fine in tournaments. He's someone that projects to be a decent value option, especially at 4,300. Just takes a little bit of a hit being in that starting lineup, but he does have upside. I mean, we've seen him cover his salary a couple times recently, so I'm fine with him in tournaments. If you need someone that can, play a decent amount of minutes in the spot for cash, I understand the play. More of a DraftKings specific cash game option, more of a FanDuel specific tournament option. He becomes a significantly better play if John Wall is out, where he sees a 28.9% usage rate and averages 0.95 fantasy points per minute. We would also see Austin Rivers and Tomas Satoransky get minutes boosts. Both of those guys would be interesting value options right now. It's really tough to like either one of those guys. But again, if John Wall were to sit, both of those guys would become excellent value options. I would probably lean probably Satoransky, because I think people will chase the Rivers game. But I'll cover that in Discord if that news happens to break in our favor. Since moving to the power forward spot, Otto Porter, three games, 39.5, 34.25, 48.75 fantasy points. He's fine in cash and fine in tournaments. He still projects to be a really, really solid value, especially on DraftKings, where he comes in at 5,700. I really like him in this spot. Dwight would be a tournament option if he plays. Obviously, a little bit of narrative there for Dwight Howard. Coming at 5,800 on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel, a great tournament option if he plays. If he sits, look for the Jeff Green and the Markieff Morris guys to get some boosts here. Again, more of that will come in Discord depending on how our news shakes out. Moving on, San Antonio and Chicago. San Antonio 6-point favorites in this game, 215 over under. I have a ton of interest in the San Antonio side of this game. Pau Gasol is out, Lauri Markkanen, Chris Dunn, Bobby Portis all out. Chandler Hutchison is questionable. I do have to warn against the Spurs a little bit in this spot. Greg Popovich has talked about how he wants to cut back on the minutes for the veterans. He wants to start working in rest games for the veterans. So LaMarcus Aldridge, Rudy Gobert, DeMar DeRozan. We'll have to wait and see if that happens here. They are in the midst of a road trip, and they've been playing a lot of games. So definitely need to keep an eye on the status of those guys, because this is a really, really, really good spot for them. As of right now, DeMar DeRozan, excellent option here against the Bulls. 28.9% usage rate on the season. Chicago is struggling to defend in the paint. 31% of his shots come from the paint. Again, this is another spot kind of like Milwaukee, where you target DeMar DeRozan in games where opponents can't really defend in the paint in the mid-range, because he takes so many shots there. LaMarcus Aldridge, if you take a look over here at the projections, LaMarcus Aldridge, very, very, very solid option on both sites. $400 price tag difference between FanDuel and DraftKings. 8,100 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. Projects in the mid 40s to be a really, really solid value and ranks out pretty much evenly on both sites. I absolutely love LaMarcus Aldridge in cash and in tournaments. This is a great spot for him. Obviously, coming off a down game, popping back over to DraftKings, coming off a down game against the Bucks here. Shot 6 of 12, just didn't get any rebounds, but the 3 games before that had double-digit rebounds, double-digit scoring, over 40 fantasy points, and 2 of those. 8,100, just way too cheap, I think, for LaMarcus Aldridge in this spot. It is a fantastic spot here. He's going to play the center position for the majority of the game, and Chicago been getting destroyed by centers. They rank 30th in defensive efficiency to the center position, 25.5 points, 16.6 rebounds, 53% shooting from the floor. LMA is taking 29% of his shots in the paint. Opponents are shooting 42.9% against Chicago in the paint. Chicago also giving up 1.02 points per possession on post-ups. LaMarcus Aldridge is posting up 38% of the time. I love LaMarcus Aldridge in all formats. Going to be a core option. I'm going to be squeezing him in to my lineups tonight. Rudy Gay still perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. A guy still has double-double upside. He's been really solid recently. Price is starting to climb, 6,200 and 6,300, but still projects to be a solid cash game option. And then Bryn Forbes. We definitely need to talk about Bryn Forbes here. Coming in, the minutes have been solid for him, upper 20s, low 30s. The field goal attempts over the last 3, 11, 10, 11, has been shooting really well recently. 50% from the floor over the last 6 games. This is a good spot for him. 3,800. Really, really, really solid spot for Bryn Forbes. I like him as a really good value option tonight against a terrible Bulls defense. I think on FanDuel your better option is to use Patty Mills and punt the position, because Patty Mills, another guy still playing a decent amount of minutes. Obviously we know he can have upside in just about any matchup. I think Patty Mills on FanDuel is the better play, but over on DraftKings I'm perfectly fine with Bryn Forbes in all formats. Flipping over to the Chicago side of things, Zach LaVine, 32% usage rate on the season, has eclipsed 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games and 6 of the last 10. He's another guy, kind of like Jrue Holiday, where most nights you can comfortably expect him to get you about 40-plus fantasy points. San Antonio ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to shooting guards on the season. This is a good spot for Zach LaVine. I like him in cash. I like him in tournaments. More of an option on DraftKings at 7,700. For cash, more of a tournament option, I think, on FanDuel at 8,600, but still a really solid spot for him. San Antonio allowing 0.94 points per possession to the pick and roll ball handler Zach LaVine, operating in the pick and roll about 27% of the time. Arcidiacono is Arcidiacono. He's a fine punt option on FanDuel or DraftKings in tournaments. Shaq Harrison, a guy that I think you can use in tournaments on DraftKings or as a punt option on FanDuel. We know he has upside whenever he gets the minutes. He hasn't really gotten a ton of minutes recently. These last 2 games where he shot really poorly, I don't expect that to continue, but he's a guy averaging over a fantasy point per minute on the season. So Shaq Harrison, someone definitely to keep an eye on if you need to punt and you want to get away from some of the other chalky options. Jabari Parker does not really jump off the page as a good play here, but he has been playing really, really well recently. Jabari Parker has scored 20 or more points in 3 straight games, and 4 of the last 5 has eclipsed 40 fantasy points in 3 straight. Just a 23% usage rate over that span, though. The rest of this game, Wendell Carter Jr. continues to be a guy that's not playing a ton of minutes anymore. He did get over 30 against Minnesota, was in foul trouble, has been in foul trouble the last 3 games. I have concerns about taking him against a guy that likes to post up a lot, because you can get big men in foul trouble, but Wendell Carter Jr. in tournaments is perfectly fine. And then Justin Holiday. Justin Holiday has been ridiculously good recently. Justin Holiday continues to play a lot of minutes, Price has not really come up too much. Over on FanDuel, he's 5,700. It's a little less appealing there. But he's fine in cash. Last couple games, 40 minutes, double-digit field goal attempts. He takes a lot of shots, a lot of three-pointers, but the double-digit rebounds, that's really, really, really promising to see. So I'm fine with Justin Holiday in cash or in tournaments here if he fits your lineup construction. Moving on, Boston at New Orleans. New Orleans 1-point favorites in this game. Another injury game to keep an eye on here. Jaylen Brown is doubtful. Anthony Davis is questionable. Terry Rozier is probable. Gordon Hayward is probable. And Elfrid Payton is out. 220.5 over-under in this one. Without Davis on the floor, got to find it here. The Pelicans are 0-4. They've allowed an average of 126 points without Davis in the lineup. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. If Davis is ruled out, definitely want to get a lot of exposure to Boston here, and there are lots of places to look. Starting with my favorite option on the entire slate and someone that I am going to be building around. He is really close to that L word that I do not like to say, the lock button for me. With Jaylen Brown off the floor, Kyrie Irving sees a 2.6% usage boost and is averaging 1.48 fantasy points per minute this season. Kyrie Irving is 8,700 on DraftKings. He's coming off 2 really down games. One of those, he only played 20 minutes, so it was actually a good game for him. He just played 20 minutes. Over 20 field goal attempts in 3 of the last 4. Absolutely one of my favorite options. He's going to be a core option for me, especially if Chris Paul plays, but I love him in all formats. New Orleans ranks 29th in defensive efficiency to point guards, 28.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, 8.5 assists, 47.6% from the floor, and 41.6% from 3. Kyrie, 34% of his shots come from 3. Gets a pretty big boost here. I love Kyrie Irving in this spot. Marcus Smart has over 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4. Should play about 28 minutes without Jaylen Brown. He is a perfectly fine cash and tournament value. Projects actually really, really well. Taking a look, all of Boston actually projects really well in this spot because they are getting some extra minutes. David Nwaba ruled out. I will cover in Discord what that means, but might take me off Chetty Osman in the spot and might move me on to Larry Nance a little bit more. But again, I'll cover that in depth in Discord. But taking a look at the projections here, obviously Kyrie Irving projects really, really, really solid value. His ranking is up there. I believe it's probably top 5 on the entire slate. Let's see. Let's take a look. Kyrie Irving is 1, 2, 3, 5th. 5th on the slate so far in ranking. So as of right now. So Kyrie Irving, really, really solid play here. I love Gordon Hayward in the spot coming off a rest game. Sees a plus 5.3 fantasy point boost per 36 minutes without Brown. I don't expect him to play 36 minutes. I'd expect him to play right around probably 32, 33, assuming this game stays close. Gordon Hayward at 5,500, way too cheap on DraftKings. I'm going to be using him as a great value option. 6,400 on FanDuel. A little pricey, but I'm still fine with him in cash and tournaments over there. Jason Tatum, someone else that sees a little bit of a boost. I'm fine with Jason Tatum in all formats. Back to Gordon Hayward real quick. Pelicans are allowing 43.8% on corner threes. 13% of Gordon's shots come in the corner from the corner, so it is a great spot for him. Jason Tatum operating in isolation 18% of the time. New Orleans is allowing 1.17 points per possession in isolation. Fine in cash, fine in tournaments. Al Horford projects to be a really, really good value on DraftKings at 5,400. I'm fine with him in cash and fine with him in tournaments. And then Marcus Morris, someone that I do have a lot of interest in as well, depending on how news breaks out. Marcus Morris, someone that would see a little bit of a minutes boost, would probably get into the starting lineup, but at 5,200 on DraftKings and 5,100 on FanDuel, a guy that I comfortably project for right around 30 fantasy points in this spot. So I absolutely love Marcus Morris as a value here. Flipping over to the New Orleans side of things, obviously Anthony Davis is a great option if he plays. Going to be down on the list for me though. Last season in 2 meetings against Boston, 39.5 points, 13.5 rebounds is what he averaged. It's a good spot for him. If he plays, you can play him. Jrue Holiday, again, regardless of Anthony Davis, Jrue Holiday at 8,300 and 8,900, pretty much good for 40 plus fantasy points regardless. He does have upside, obviously, with his 26.2% usage and 1.15 fantasy points per minute without Davis. But again, you're pretty comfortable in the fact that he's probably going to get you 40 plus fantasy points tonight, regardless of Davis. Mirotic is fine in tournaments if Davis plays. Randall is fine in tournaments if Davis plays. Neither really jumps off as a great play if Anthony Davis suits up. If he sits, Randall, 31.6% usage, 1.53 fantasy points per minute, would project for a ton of minutes in the spot. He played 38 last game. Double upside, triple upside in the spot, just with the sheer amount of usage that he gets. He would be someone that I would be smashing that lock button on again if Anthony Davis is out. Mirotic, 25.4% usage rate, 1.24 fantasy points per minute. He's perfectly fine as well. He's 6,900 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel. Perfectly fine option in cash and in tournaments, but Randall is the guy that I would be getting the most exposure to. You can obviously use all three. That was a viable strategy last game. That's a viable strategy this game. I would run it back with Kyrie Irving or Gordon Hayward or Jason Tatum or somebody from Boston. If you run all three, you can use two of the three or just one of the three. My personal strategy is probably just going to be to use Randall and then get some exposure elsewhere. But again, Davis sits, all three of those guys are in play. Moving on, we have Indiana at Utah. This game, some injury news to cover here with Oladipo is questionable, Donovan Mitchell is questionable, Domantas Sabonis is questionable, Miles Turner is questionable. Of all those people, Utah's favored by 5, 207.5 over under. Of all those people, I have the least amount of faith in Oladipo being able to suit up based on what Nate McMillan has said. Over the weekend, he talked to reporters, said, Victor, in regards to Victor, he hasn't done anything live on the floor in a week. He's a lot further away from coming back than those two guys, referring to Sabonis and Miles Turner. He's going to have to go through a couple of live practices before he is allowed to play. That sounds like Victor Oladipo probably not going to suit up. Obviously, we want to wait for official word, but I'm assuming he sits. So to look at the Indiana side of things, if he sits, Aaron Holiday moves into territory of someone that you can definitely look at here. Aaron Holiday has actually been pretty solid with Victor Oladipo out, playing right around 21, 22 minutes, double-digit field goal attempts. He's averaging over a fantasy point per minute on the season. He's a very, very solid value option at 3,600 on DraftKings. Let me pull up FanDuel pricing and my projections. He is not in the projections because I didn't have Oladipo projected out yet. So I would imagine he's pretty cheap over on FanDuel as well. Someone that I would definitely be getting some exposure to, especially in tournaments, but he's borderline cash playable for sure. The rest of the Pacers, obviously Darren Collison sees a little bit of a boost. Darren Collison would be someone that I would be getting some exposure to. 4,600 on DraftKings, 4,900 on FanDuel. Perfectly fine cash option, perfectly fine in tournaments. We saw him put up a really solid game against Utah just a few games ago. Victor Oladipo was out for that one as well. He is the kind of point guard that we like to take against the Jazz. So I like Darren Collison here. Corey Joseph is fine. In GPPs, I still prefer Collison because he's similarly priced. Outside of those guys, Thaddeus Young is fine. Utah does struggle against post-ups. He's just Thaddeus Young, never has a ton of upside, but he's a perfectly fine cash option. Got to get you in the mid-20s. There's several guys in this game where they're similarly priced, like with Favors, Crowder, Thad Young, Bojangles, guys that you just feel like can get you 20 plus fantasy points most nights, and they're perfectly fine in cash. I would lean towards Sabonis over Miles Turner in the spot if Sabonis plays, because of the monster usage boost that he sees whenever Victor Oladipo is out, especially if Turner plays and Sabonis comes off the bench. He gets a really, 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 really big boost being the guy in that second unit. Does a lot of the ball handling. Obviously, Utah not the greatest against big men this season. We saw Sabonis 19-9-9 in a very similar spot last time these teams faced off. It's just a matter of if he's able to play. It's dealing with a nagging like leg injury for him. Turner and GPPs. If Sabonis is out, you get some extra minutes for Turner. You get some Kylo Quinn minutes, but neither guy really appealing here. Flipping over to the Utah side of this, Donovan Mitchell's fine in tournaments if he plays. Not really someone I'm looking at though. There's just better options on the slate in this spot. I do have a lot of interest in some of the other guys if Mitchell is out. 16% of Jay Crowder's field goal attempts are corner threes. Opponents are shooting 50% on corner threes with against the Pacers, and Jay Crowder, a guy, sees a 4.2% usage boost without Donovan Mitchell on the floor. Jay Crowder actually got the start last game. Produced mid-20s in fantasy points. Again, this is kind of like the Thad Young and the Bojangles and the Derek Favors in the spot last time out. Really solid game. Had a couple blocks that kind of boosted his stat line. But I like Jay Crowder as a mid-range cash and tournament option. I like Derek Favors a significant amount. I actually like him coming off the bench. I'm still going to play right around the same amount of minutes, but has the chance for a few extra rebounds and things like that because he's not playing alongside Rudy Gobert for some of those minutes. He averages plus 5.35 fantasy points per 36 minutes without Mitchell on the floor, so he gets a little bit of a boost. I have a lot of interest in Derek Favors in the spot, especially if Mitchell is out. Without Mitchell on the floor, Rubio, 29% usage rate, 1.01 fantasy points per minute. His assist rate goes from 28.9% to 44.9% without him. We saw him, come out last night, look really solid, 42 fantasy points, 11 to 16 from the floor. The double-digit field goal attempts, really appealing. Torched the Pacers last time out. I love Ricky Rubio, a core option for me if Donovan Mitchell sits this game out. Moving on, final game of the night, Orlando at Golden State. More injury news to keep an eye on in this one. Stephen Curry is out, Draymond Green is out, and Draymond Green is questionable. Sorry, Alfonso McKinney is questionable. So, again, this is another one. How injuries shake out kind of changes how we're going to attack things. Orlando coming in on a back-to-back. They played the mid-afternoon yesterday, so I'm not necessarily worried about the back-to-back. Vucevic coming off 70 fantasy point game against the Lakers, averaged 33.5 points and 14 rebounds in 2 wins against the Lakers in the span of just 9 days. That's really impressive. Vucevic, this is a guy who just continues to be just super solid on the season. Leads the team in usage. 25.9%, and leads the team in touches at 69.8 per game. Obviously coming off a bad game against the Nuggets, only played 28 minutes. Expect him back over the 30 minute mark. Rebounding potential is here for him. Obviously, we know the touches and the usage are there for him. 7,800 is way too cheap for Nikola Vucevic on DraftKings. He's 9K on FanDuel. I still project him for over 40 fantasy points, so you can still use him in cash, and he obviously has monster tournament upside here. Should feast in this spot, especially if Draymond Green is out. 21% of Aaron Gordon's shots come at the rim. Opponents are shooting 66.1% against the Warriors at the rim. Again, if Draymond Green is out, that is a pretty big boost to Aaron Gordon, who is 7,100 on DraftKings. Really affordable price. I like him in cash and tournaments on DraftKings. More of a tournament play at 7,800 on FanDuel. Um, Jonathan Isaac, not a guy that possesses a ton of upside most nights. He has had a few big games, but 3,500 in the spot, 3,500 in a game, projected right around 215 over under, should be a little bit faster paced. This is a really good spot for Jonathan Isaac. Obviously, I'm a little concerned that they might limit his minutes tonight. That's something to keep an eye on, but he can get you some steals, can get you some rebounds. Has upside at 3,500 on DraftKings. I really like that price for him there. He is 4,700 on FanDuel. That's a fade for me. Y'all are going to have to bear with me as I hit the lock button on DJ Augustine. I might need to hit that self-exclude button, but DJ Augustine, y'all know I've been on the DJ Augustine train pretty much as a cash option all freaking season long. Coming off off a solid game against the Lakers, put up 31 fantasy points. He's a guy I feel confident most nights is going to get you in the mid to upper 20s. 3,800 on DraftKings, way too cheap for DJ Augustine. I like him in cash, and that price tag makes him a great tournament option. 4,500 on FanDuel, more of a cash option for me there, but he does grade out as a pretty solid play. 30% of his shots come at the rim. Again, we talked about it. Opponents are shooting 66.1% at the rim against the Warriors this season. Better option if Draymond Green is out. Evan Fournier, someone that you can consider in tournaments as well. Obviously, we know Golden State has a great defender on the other side of the ball with Klay Thompson, but Evan Fournier at 5,300 on DraftKings, really appealing here, coming off a couple of down games, but we know Fournier is going to take a lot of shots, and that's really appealing in this spot. On the Golden State side of things, obviously, the status of Draymond Green is going to really dictate how we attack this game. Hopefully we get that news early and they don't do the, he's questionable or game time decision stuff, because this is the latest game of the night. Starts an hour and a half later than any other game, so you won't have any pivots if you try to build around some plays in this game. Without Curry on the floor, we know Kevin Durant, like a 40% usage rate, monster fantasy production, 1.46 fantasy points per minute, climbs to 1.51 without Draymond Green. We've seen Kevin Durant the last two games is really broken out, but over 50 fantasy points in 4 straight without Green, without Curry. This game, going to play a lot of minutes if this game stays close, going to take a lot of shots. Rebounding potential is there. Kevin Durant at 10-9 would be my favorite stud player if Draymond Green gets ruled out. Would still be a great option, but more of a tournament option if Draymond Green plays. The rest of this team, if Green plays, probably going to play limited minutes, but would be worth a look in tournaments at his price. $7K on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel. Klay Thompson, I really like him in all formats regardless of the Draymond Green status. Averages between 1.05 and 1.09 fantasy points per minute when you have Curry and or Green off the floor. Usage rate over 35% in either scenario. He's looked really solid recently. After scoring fewer than 20 points in each of his first 7 games, Thompson has reached that mark in 12 of the last 14 contests. Klay Thompson has looked really solid recently. I like this spot for him. Price is up there a little bit, 7,300 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel, but you feel pretty good that he can get you in the upper 30s in this spot. Quinn Cook, someone to keep an eye on. Again, if Draymond Green is out, Quinn Cook, a significantly better play. Orlando ranks 22nd in defensive efficiency to point guards, so it is a good spot for Quinn Cook at 5,100 if we get the Draymond Green news. Tonight's shot really poorly. Last game, still had a really solid game. The assist numbers and the rebounding numbers are there for him, so I like him more if Draymond Green is out because Green can take some assists away from Cook. As far as the big men go, they're all, it's like a freaking roulette wheel of death with these big men. Steve Kerr came out and said Jordan Bell was going to get more run after he played really well against Portland, and he got 13 minutes. So can't really trust that. I do think, assuming McKinney and Draymond Green Green is out. I think Kevon Looney is the guy that I'm going to be going back to. Obviously, got in some foul trouble against the Kings, got in foul trouble against the Trailblazers. He is the more defensive-minded big man that they have, and they're going to need that against Vucevic. So Kevon Looney, 3,800, 4K on FanDuel. He would be the guy that I would be looking at there. But that covers it. That's all 7 games. Tons of injury news. Lots of stuff to keep an eye on. I will be updating everyone in Discord as news changes and news breaks. But good luck in all your contests tonight. Will be back for a rare Tuesday podcast tomorrow.